Hi, everybody. I'm going to start with Chapter 3 of the PDE exam by the PPRA. I'm going to share my screen and go through the module with you. And where I highlighted, I think you need to open up your file and follow me, make notes, and highlight your file as we go along. So I'm going to stop my video camera and I'm going to start to share my screen. Let me just do this. I'm going to share my entire screen. Okay, and you should see my screen right now. I just want to open up Chapter 3. There you go. We are at the index, and very important again, put a label at your index of all the chapters so that you can refer to the index if you need any information. You will see these lots of definitions with words, etc. on page 105. So this is your index. Now we move on the purpose and the overview of the module. You can see that's the unit standard 119457. Read the outcome of the module. It's a lot to do with communication and definitions and language differences. Because South Africa is such a diverse society, we're all not on the same page with relation to language, definitions, perceptions, frame of reference. And I think this is what this module tried to explain to us, that we have to be objective and that we have to try to understand the different cultures, etc. So this is now the unit standard essential for the embedded knowledge. If we move on to section 1 on page 112, you will see it's basically to do with communication. There's a good definition of communication that I highlighted. Then 1.3 is unfamiliar words. How do you react when you come across a word that you do not understand? Now, my point of view is don't blabber on, stop and ask questions if you need to ask questions. Otherwise, you're just going to make an idiot out of yourself. So if you don't understand something, stop the conversation and say, listen, I do not understand this word. Let me just quickly look it up. And Google is your friend, or you can use Chat GPT for that, for definitions, okay? So syntaxes can be defined, 1.3.1, as the organization of words and sentences. They might ask you a question to say, what is a syntax? Is it A, B, C, D, or E? And they love these questions. So then you know, listen, I have a definition of syntaxes on page 113. And you quickly move to that page and there's your syntax definition. There's even an example, 2 examples. Then a word attack. Now, it's the first time in my life I heard of a word attack, but it refers to looking at the unfamiliar word in its context and trying to see what you can work out from the context. This is dangerous, though, because we do not have the same frame of reference or the same perception. So you might see something in a total different context than me, and then your word attack can be totally wrong. So my advice is look it up if you don't know the meaning. There is an example of a word attack. Again, you might get a question on that. Context, it's quite straightforward. It's the text surrounding a word, a passage, or a phrase. It's quite forward. The context help to explain the word's full meaning, which is obvious. Clause 1.3.4, unfamiliar words borrowed from other languages. Now, I think this is quite relevant to us because we get words like Ubuntu and Gogo. That Gogo is very old, and that means grandmother, Oma. Some people even use the word Oma, and that's also from a different, from an Afrikaans language, for example. So there's some good examples for you to see. It's good if you know the words that they use, especially if you want to connect with your clients. It helps to build a positive relationship with them if you know the words or the phrases, okay? Clause 1.3.5 on page 116 is complex terms. A complex term is a word that is made up of more than one word, and it's used to combine two ideas together. And there they give you an example. Activity 1.2, I did put the answers there for you. Highlight this and make a note, because that's definitions basically: subdivision, semi-detached, information technology, government gazette, sectional title, a title deed, and a trust account. So you can see a trust account is it's a bank account open for the purpose of holding money for other persons, okay? Yeah, so, and a semi-detached is two separate homes that are joined together by a common dividing wall. So if you go through that, highlight it, make sure you know it, or you know how to refer to that during the open book exam. Then we get to acronyms, which is defined as words that is formed from initials. Like NATO, it stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is quite straightforward. Activity 1.3, they do ask you questions like this. Like the DTI is the Department of Trade and Industry. So you can see DTI, Department of Trade and Industry. So there's your examples. It's quite straightforward. Then neologism is it can be defined as a new word or a meaning, or it can refer to a recently coined word or phrase. There's an example. For a lot of people talk about of vacuum cleaners, and it's actually a Hoover. Or a plaster. Some people call a plaster a elastoplast, or Google something. In my household, Google is a verb. So there's your examples. Activity 1.4, it's also good to familiarize yourself with the content. And slang, my opinion is, please don't use slang in a professional setting. It's not so professional. Even if your clients use the slang phrases or whatever, you stay professional. I also picked up some people communicate in Afrikaans and then they use English words. That's horrible. You don't do that. It's not professional at all. Try to stick to one language at a time. Always be aware of your audience, of your clients, and be proactive and professional. Activity 1.5, again, familiarize yourself with the content. Jargon, the definition, there's the definition of jargon on page 122. Jargon is not a good way of communicating with the general public. Because it's like quite a specialist language. Now, you can use jargon in the realtor industry as long as you explain to your client what it stands for, because your client is not going to know what's a listing or a OTP. And they're not even going to ask you what it means, because some of them, most of the time, they don't like to ask questions. So if you say OTP, just say offer to purchase, then they also learn something. Okay, so yeah, there's examples of jargon words, dialects, can be defined as a regional variety of language with marked differences in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Then you get your different Englishes. South African English is very understandable. We pronounce it very clear. It's a very good English. It's not very different from the standard British English, although we have a different dialect. Then there's examples. Activity 1.6. It's fun. I mean, I think you need to do the activity that you can get familiarize yourself with the content. Then ambiguous words. It can have one or more meanings, a word, a phrase, or a sentence. It can be ambiguous. You can interpret it in various ways. For example, a bank can be a financial institution, or it can mean the edge of a river. So you get a lot of those. There's different examples: a bat, a rate, absent, planes. So that's quite important because the context is going to be important when selecting the meaning. You can do activity 1.7, and then we get to summarizing and paraphrasing. Now, this is basically what I'm doing. I'm paraphrasing the chapter for you. To paraphrase is to rephrase and simplify the content, or to restate something using other words, especially in order to make it simpler and shorter. Now, when you explain your offer to purchase to your buyers or your sellers, you use paraphrasing because you explain to them and so that they can understand. You try to make it more simpler to understand. If your buyer or seller is in a hurry, then you're going to summarize the offer to purchase whilst paraphrasing. So to summarize is you're going to make a quick summary and give a shortened version of what's been said or written. Okay. Activity 1.8, which is good if you can go through that and familiarize yourself again with the content. Then they've got essays that you need to analyze, which is a good exercise. Then you have another communication medium, graphic and visual aids, clause 1.6 on page 131. That is nonverbal communication, and you will use that in your advertisements. Illustration, familiarize yourself with the definitions, photographs, aerial photography, pictures and drawings. There's different examples, and then you get your graphs, various graphs, bar graph, you get your pie charts. I think you all had this in high school. So it's just to go through it, your diagrams. Diagrams show the floor plans of a property or a layout of a garden, or some people even do a diagram of the irrigation system. There's different examples for you. Then we get maps. So I think everybody is familiar with maps. It's a visual representation that shows parts of the Earth's surface with geographical features, urban areas, roads, dolomitic content, water levels, etc., etc. So there's different examples for you. Then you get mind maps. Now, mind maps is nothing to do with geographical maps, but here's an example for mind maps, which was an excellent example. Mind maps and brainstorming. So we use that in our team building sessions. Here's a very well illustrated mind map. This will be such a good exercise if you can do this and actually show to your clients, because this includes your major duties, your code of conduct, your honesty, transparency, you maintain your client's confidentiality, you maintain integrity. This is your obligations to the seller and your obligation to the buyer. So this is a very creative mind map. You can even put the logo in here. It's very good to show to your buyers or sellers. Activity 1.13 is a very good exercise. You can do a mind map to illustrate the major points below, maybe to ratepayers, to say how you do code of conduct, your major duties, etc. It's a very good exercise to do, and you can write the definitions as you go along. Okay. Some people use cartoons. I don't think in our industry cartoons is the way to go. Here's cartoon analyst worksheets with examples. Then there is self-assessment questions. This is a whole lot of definitions again on page 143. This is definitions. So write the definitions down that you don't have to go and look for it. So this is also a very good exercise. Section 2 is how to accommodate your audience and context needs in oral communication. You have to implicit messages as indirect messages, which can be picked up directly from the context. To imply something is to suggest it, but without stating it directly. I don't like to imply something. I'll rather state something directly, but you need to be familiar with the definition. Then your source of text. You are exposed to a range of text in everyday life. So you need to see your source and see if it's a reputable source. You know, an article in the Sun magazine won't be a reputable source. Most news articles is very sensational. So rather get your sources from the Financial Times or the Business Insider. Journalist articles with a bit of worth, you know. Also, if you make a statement, you know, whose perception is that? Is it your own perception or is it someone else's perception? You always have to be very careful of what you say and who you cite and what's your source always. Reliability is, again, I did explain that. And then they have actually sensationalism. So there's another definition from you. Clause 2.2.5, we have to strive for objectivity. Objectivity is free of bias, prejudice caused by personal feelings. Objectivity is based on facts rather than thoughts or opinions. That's why I said opinions are very dangerous. Rather base your findings on facts and not opinions. So that's quite difficult. It's easier said than done. Bias can be defined as a preference, a dislike of something. There's an example for you. And in activity 2.1, you can examine the examples of the biased statements and identify what source you think they come from. This is quite a valuable exercise, not only for the exam, but in general, you know, because you have to identify your source and if it's a reputable source. Okay, then attitude, clause 2.3.1, and we are on page 147. Well, it can be described as an opinion or a general feeling about something. There's an example. Belief can be described as the acceptance of the truth of something. There's different examples. And then we have activity 2.2, which is also good to familiarize yourself with the content, where they discuss the attitudes, which is a good thing, page 148. Intentions, the definition, it can be described as the aim or objective of something. There's examples of that, and we move on to activity 2.3 with the viewpoint, the intention, and the source. And then you will have to match the extracts with the appropriate description of the intentions or the points of view, the perception from the list. So this is also a very valuable exercise to do. Then you have your different writing techniques and the purpose thereof on page 151. Punctuation is very critical to the reader. If you put the punctuation in the wrong place, it can sometimes mean something totally different. A poorly punctuated piece of writing will be difficult to understand. And then obviously your choice of words. The choice of words influence a great deal of what you intend to try to say, your message that gets conveyed. So if you don't find a professional word, look it up, Google it, or ask ChatGPT to, in a professional tone, to paraphrase the message in a professional tone or something like that. There's lots of YouTube videos how you can give instructions to ChatGPT, which is a wonderful tool to use specifically for your advertisements. You can put all the keywords and then give the instruction to provide a professional descriptive paragraph about the property. And it does this in like 2 seconds, where if you have to go and sit and brainstorm and jargon and try to do the advertisement yourself, it's going to save you a lot of time. Then we have figurative language. It's something that's not literal, like I'm green of jealousy. I'm not literally green, so there's the examples of that. Familiarize yourself with it. And activity 2.6, this is extracts that you will have to match with the sets of the information given to them. And then you have to decide which type of writing technique each word is. And is it slang, jargon? Is it a picture? Is it a dialect? Is it technical terms? So this is also a very valuable exercise to do, because they might ask you questions and then you've done the answers. You're going to write your answers down, so you can basically use your answers as study material for the open book exam. Clause 3.4.4 is humor. Humor is very good, entertaining your clients. Just make sure that you're on the same page with that you share the same humor. Irony, it can be defined as a type of humor. Then there's the definition, sarcasm, definition, examples. Satire can be described as the use of wit, especially irony or sarcasm. There's an example, visual techniques that you can use, and the examples of that on page 156. Then we have video, TV, and films. You do your video recordings of the houses. You have your activities, promotion of line of thought. This is achieved by leaving out certain materials. There's an example for you. Activity 2.10 is again good to familiarize yourself. And then there is self-assessment questions to make sure that you understand the content, okay? Define what is meant by an implied message. Write it down on the same page 160. Write the definitions. As I said, you can use your answers as content for the exam. Then we move on to section 3. Text for a range of communicative contexts. We have our introduction and our outcome. Then you have your instructions like orders and a list of things to do. It's pretty much everything is the definitions, and everything in chapter 2 and 3 has got to do with communication. Okay. There's again written communication, your font type, format, and register. There's different font types for you to see. Your format is your structure, the way in which you present something. That's the format. And there's an example of a format. There's a format of a letter, for an example, a professional letter. There's another letter in a different format. A register means when you speak to your seniors, you will use a formal register. If you use slang, you are using an informal register. So just familiarize yourself with the definitions. If we move on to page 167, there's self-assessment questions. And again, it's definitions, instruction, request, a text type, and everything is in the content that we just browsed through. If you don't know, Google it. If you want clarity on it, you are welcome to email me anytime and I will answer your questions very promptly. Shaping a point of view, clause 4.3 is a point of view is shaped by the choice of words, language usage, accompanying visuals or pictures, tone, and style. And then this is basically a bit repetitive because bias is not objective, okay? Yeah, it says here, it was stated in an earlier section that bias represented an unfair preference or a dislike of something. Bias is unfair because it's not representative how we should treat people. There is an activity, 4.1, which is again very good to familiarize yourself with the necessary examples on page 170. And again, activity 4.2. Here we go again with humor. As I said, it's a bit repetitive. Humor is used in advertisements to influence consumers. You can use humor very proactively as long as your perception of the humor is in line with your client's perception of humor. Because maybe you think something is funny and they don't, and then your humor brainstorming won't be as successful as rather leave it out, okay? Because it's not going to influence your client in a positive way if you're not on the same page. There's activity 4.3 and activity 4.4 to do. And then we have figurative expressions. It makes written language more interesting. There's different examples, huffing and puffing. As you can see, this is extremely linguistic because we all have different languages. Repetition, this is what we've done now 2 or 3 times in the same module. Repetition is used where you can influence your reader to create a support of a particular point of view. Then you have your exaggeration that can be used for various effects. Your activity 4.5. Stereotype is if you try to standardize something. This is very dangerous because if you try to put everybody in a box, you try to standardize them and rather see the individual and try not to standardize people, see the individual. Don't see the person as a group. Like you see, all blondes are dumb, all Italians are emotional. This is very dangerous. Never assume. Generalization is a sweeping statement presented as a general truth, but it's based on limited or incomplete evidence. I had someone last week who told me property only sells because the price is right. Now, that is generalization because it's got very limited or incomplete evidence. And I don't know what is the source of the statement, but if a buyer see a property that's got better value than the cheaper property, and he has to pay, or he or she has to pay slightly a bit more, even if the property is more expensive. If they see more value in the property that's more expensive, they're going to buy the more expensive property. I know buyers buy what they can afford, but they have a price range within that limitation. And there's other agents as well. If you're going to go from the generalization that only price makes a property sell, you're going to fail miserably because the purchaser needs to see the value of the property he or she is buying. Yeah, there's examples for this generalization on page 175, which you can follow with examples. Then clause 4.3.7, we have pictures and captions and how they are used to influence people. Then you have your activity 4.6 on page 177, which is wonderful to do. Familiarize yourself with the content. Typography refers to the layout of a page or pages. There's a activity. And then your grammar. Grammar or correct language usage is another technique that you need to be aware of. A well-written text. Now, I can say a well-written advertisement will have a greater impact than something that is full of grammatical errors. That's why I did send you that WhatsApp to tell you use ChatGPT for your advertisements. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. I actually send a news article with a real estate agent that in America that's using ChatGPT, and at this stage it's free. So, use my advice. It's going to make your life a whole lot more easier. Then on clause 4.4, self-assessment questions, again, the definitions. You have to write the definitions. You can see it's a lot of definitions. I think it's to get everybody on the same page with the different cultures, that we have the same definitions of these concepts. So it's quite important. You are definitely going to get questions, okay? And that basically sums the whole module up on chapter 3. In my next video, I will load the POE project 4, because as far as you should have completed your POE project 1, 2, and 3. So we are at project 4. You are welcome to send me emails, and yeah, I'm going to close this off now, and I'm going to stop the recording, and the next session should follow within a week. Okay. So, yeah, that's all from me. Enjoy your evening further, and have a good day further. Bye-bye.